put one out a month, a week? How often? Make sure my phone is shut off.
I know. I got to be in the same boat, right? Evening, everyone. Alex Tanner here, talking shop with Outlier Firefighters. I'm with Chief Scott Thompson, FDIC keynote speaker, author of The Functional Fire Company, Chief of the Colony Fire Department in Texas. Chief, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you tonight.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. I'm looking forward to it also, having a good discussion.
Yeah, obviously culture is a huge thing that you write about and usually speak about. And I got in one of the vigilante post interview things with you, one of the meetups that they do, or what, I can't remember the name, but whatever Corley names that thing after the script.
Yeah.
And I asked you a question about macro
After party,
culture.
yeah.
After party, that's it.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that because I want to talk
Yeah.
about macro culture because it's seldom talked about from a lot of departments.
Okay.
But I want to start with you first. So what was your first exposure to the fire service?
Oh, I grew up in a little town called Croton-on-Hudson, about 40 miles from New York City, and they had a all volunteer fire department there. They had three firehouses and five fire companies, and so that was a time when you were a kid, you rode your bike all over town, and they had a fire whistle in town. So when there was a call, they'd blow the big whistle. I lived at the corner of Maple and Olcott. There was a firebox there. They were all the pull boxes, so they had all the boxes and the addresses in the front of the local phone book. So I'd always ride around with that phone book in my back pocket, and the fire whistle would go off, and I'd jump on my bike and then go track it down. So that was really probably it. That combined with seeing the war years of FDNY on TV, and because I was born in '62, so that was at a time when all that was going on. So that was really the first exposure in my mind. I was going to be a New York City fireman, and that was it. But as a fate would have it, my dad got a new job here in Texas, so we left New York and came to Texas.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's a total shift, right? So you lived in the
Yeah.
city, right? Or
No, 40
I
miles from the
apologize.
city.
Yeah, I just want to.
Yeah, we were right. My dad worked in the city. We were right on the Hudson River,
Okay.
40 miles north of the city, almost, not quite, but almost across the river from West Point.
Okay.
Little town, about 9,000 people at the time, but a very active volunteer fire department. And I would always go hang out there, and probably was a pain in the ass to some of them, but I was there all the time and just watching them at drills, and so that was really a fun time.
The community fire department, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what it was.
yeah.
I was fortunate enough. My first department was the tail end of that, and
Yeah.
they started. They're still making that transition to full time, but yeah, they were pretty much all paid on call or volunteer, and it was
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
awesome. Still some of the best days of my career. So when did you first get on the fire, like your first fire department, like you're going through the fire academy, and then kind of what was your growth to get to where you are now in the colony?
So we moved to Texas, and I was a teenager when I graduated from high school. I went to the fire academy. In Texas, you have to be a certified fireman to go to work. So I went right out of high school to Texas A&M Fire School. I was class 36, and so put my way through there. I loved it, but I also enjoyed A&M, so I stuck around to go to school. But I joined. They had an emergency care, like a hospital there, where I rode an ambulance, and then I joined the Brazos County. It's not called that anymore, but the county fire department there as a volunteer. So I did that for a while, and then graduated. Ended up transferring to the University of North Texas. They opened a degree in emergency management, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I was in landscape architect at A&M, and I knew I wasn't going to do that. So I graduated from North Texas in December of 1985, and I started with the Plano, Texas Fire Department in January of '86. That was my first career gig, and so started there and spent 10 years there, and it was on the hazardous materials team and special operations. And Plano was a busy little organization at the time, and so that's kind of my first volunteer and career gig.
And uh, were you fireman when you left there, or did you climb to a rank when you left there?
No, when I left Plano, I was a fireman, but I was at about 2 years in, I went part paid to a part paid department where I was a company officer and rode the engine company, and then became full time there and ended up being a shift commander. And so did that and stayed with that. Oh gosh, for many years, and went to Arlington, Texas, and still was very active as a part paid where I lived, and it was kind of a weird. It was a part paid, kind of full paid type on call deal, and so I did that for a long time until I moved out of the area. Then I moved to when I moved down to Athens, I had to give that up.
And that was that like your first exposure then to like the company officer position in general, or did you get some of that in Plano?
No, I got some stepping up and temporary, but so I was young then, and we were a civil service, and so I took a promotional exam, and that year they added the Little Brown Book to the reading list, which was like 800 pages of hell. And so I didn't do well. I aced the operation part. I got a perfect score, and so I protested it, and I brought in my technical writer from college, and made my case, and so that just really soured my whole. And what I saw, there were officers that were passing a 100 question test and getting promoted, and they were not good officers. So if there was a downturn in my career, that was probably it. So I had to look someplace else to get that exposure. Now, with that, as a fireman, I can tell you several times I was sent out to, and it caused a lot of problems, sent out to other firehouses to ride the seat, and it would piss off the guys at that firehouse. But the chiefs had confidence in me whenever we would put extra rigs in service. I always got tapped to do that. So just kind of a hodgepodge of doing it. And, probably in 10 years collectively, probably had 4 years of experience on and off doing that. But I was very active in the hazardous material team, and was an officer doing some of that, and taught at a college locally. And so that was really kind of my passion at the time. Um, and we were one of the only hazmat teams in the region, so there was a lot of opportunities there, for overtime and all that. But
Sure.
yeah, I got a little bad taste in my mouth for the civil service system, and it took me a while to get over that.
Well, I think that uh, what you're doing now kind of that makes a lot of sense, right? I feel like some of the things that you say and you write about, and the
Yeah,
um, what I've come to understand you believe in would reflect on that, and
yeah.
that some of those processes really are just they're not as good as they should be, right? They don't really get the best candidates sometimes,
And
or
Lake Cities was extremely busy. We covered four cities. We're on the 35 corridor, and we were making 3,000 calls back then. So I was getting as much as I wanted. I mean, I was doing that on my 2 days off compared to my one day. I was 590. They don't no longer carry that, but that was my position. So it was that was really, I really enjoyed it. I just couldn't afford to do just that, so I had to do kind of double duty.
yeah, no, I get that. Hazmat, did that? Like, when did you discover that? Early on, or did it just kind of? So I should say, like, my father, when he got off probation, they told him you're going to hazmat because they picked people for teams. Like, it wasn't like, oh, if you're interested, you go. And jokingly, I don't know if it's true or not, but he told me he failed on purpose so he could join the rope rescue and high angle team. So I always have a joke about hazmat. And I'm not, trying to do that to you, but
No.
where did it get picked? Where did you get picked up in that? Like, was it like that, or was it something where you had an interest after you got off your feet wet and then you found it?
I told a little bit of a white lie, not a big white lie, but when I transferred to North Texas, I'm the fifth person in the United States to get a degree in emergency management. Third, depending on who you talk to, but the University of North Texas was the very first university to have a formal degree in emergency management. And so when you go into that, you kind of pick a specialty. Well, this was in the early 80s. So fire departments were just starting to get into hazmat. It was the new thing. And I always jump on opportunities. And so I did all my elective stuff was focused around hazmat, chemistry, and all that other stuff. So when I got to Plano, my first day there in the academy, we didn't have our uniforms yet. They went around the room and I kind of told that story that I was studying hazardous materials and that I probably played it up a little bit. That's kind of where the white lie came in because at the time that was Plano's only special operations house. And I really wanted to go there. And they hadn't had a new guy at that firehouse for a long, long time. And so that was my shot. I was in a class of 21 and one of us went to special operations. So hazmat got me into special operations and it kept me out of paramedic school. Every time I was on the list, two or three times to go to paramedic school, I was 2 weeks out and the chief said, man, we need you on hazmat more than we need you on an ambulance. So it kind of worked out for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny how that.
Then I started teaching at the college. I taught hazmat at the college, the local college here for probably 25 years. So I did a lot of teaching and my son, when he was in Arlington, he just got off the hazmat team there. So it kind of ran in family. I'm not near as into it as I was, but it was a new thing in the fire service. We were just getting over the paramedic thing and everybody was getting into this hazmat and Sarah Title III was coming out and all that stuff. So I kind of saw that as the next big thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you just wanted to be on the forefront of some of that stuff and
Yeah. Yeah.
found an opportunity, right? That's a great message to share to anyone in the
Yeah.
job, right? Is find your
And it gave me a lot of
opportunities.
officer opportunities.
Yeah.
We ran two engines out of that firehouse, engine 2 and 22. And I was there for the duration of engine 22. I was there the day they put it in service, and I was there, and that was a citywide squad, and that was a blast. We went to every fire, we went to every pin in job, anything that was of any importance. 22 went, so it was a really great assignment. We would a lot of times just change our air packs out and they'd want us to clear up. We didn't even have to pick up hose or do any of that. We'd get back in service and they had wood shingle roofs in Plano at the time. It's a very affluent community. So we went to a lot of wood shingle roof fires. Apartments had them. So it was a good time. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a couple audience questions coming for you
Yeah.
here. So, Joe Gavita, he's asking, it's about your book, The Functional Fire Company. So,
Uh-huh.
he's saying, is there anything you would, about what you wrote, is there anything you would change about what you wrote in the book based on your experiences speaking and talking with other firefighters?
Yes, a ton. That's a great question.
That is
That's
a
a
good
great
question.
question. And I had no idea what I was doing when I wrote a book. And I always kind of thought there would be a second edition, but the powers to be said it's kind of a timeless book. But yes, a lot of that not really changed my position on, but just have taken my thought to a much greater level. And I always welcome people who read the book to provide me feedback. So yeah, if I were to write the book today, the message would kind of be the same, or the tone, but the message would be much clearer. I understand it much better because I've continued to research it, and of course talking about it and presenting it. And so, yeah, that's a great question. But yeah, specifically, it would be hard to think without going through the chapters, but I would be more I would define things better and be a little clear in the message because I have a better understanding. And I did 9 years worth of research, so I was pretty well versed in it. But you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah, well, and especially how it's received and then interpreted, right? And I think that that's
right?
exactly what you're talking about is the way someone interprets those words might trigger a different response than somebody else. So,
And I'm amazed. I mean, I always said it was for the suburban fire service, and I even say in the book this only applies to organizations with 500 members or less. But Mike Walker in Oklahoma City's a big fan of it. Dave McGrail's a big fan of it. So I'm seeing it used in a lot of really big departments. I got some calls from guys in Phoenix and different places. So it I guess it applies to larger departments. I don't like to write about things that I haven't experienced. And the largest department I ever worked for was Arlington. And at the time, I want to say they had 16 firehouses. So that's the biggest organization I've ever worked for.
yeah, I think it plugs right into what most of us in the fire service are in, like my department, where it's 50 members, right? I think it plugs right into that. And all those themes just fit. Yeah, I put that and pride and ownership together really as like the backbone, I think, of culturally developing a fire department. So,
Well,
uh,
thank you. I've heard that a couple times,
yeah,
and that's a great compliment to be considered in the same class as Rick with the work that he's done. Of course, he's one of my mentors and a friend, and I worked
yeah,
for Rick for 10 years
yeah,
as his training chief. That was my last stop before the colony.
yeah. I was I forgot. Oh, I shouldn't say I forgot about that, but yeah, I failed to mention that, and that's such a cool connection, right? How much of how much of that relationship kind of spilled over into like your book and the things that you're doing now? I would imagine a
Huge,
lot, but yeah,
huge, huge. Yeah, yeah. Rick taught me how to be a fire chief. I was a fire chief prior to going to work for him, and I was kind of programmed the Texas way, which is it's got its positives and its negatives. But I went to work for Rick, and all these things that I was told were not okay. Rick made them okay, and embraced them. Having a truck culture and this engine and truck deployment model and how we operated fires and positional firefighting. And I'd never been exposed to that until I went to work for Rick. So he opened up a whole new mindset for me. So a lot of my um, leadership soul comes from Rick Lasky and Alan Brunacini.
yeah, yeah. It definitely shows. I mean, and in a great way. It's not like you're copying them. Obviously, I'm definitely not saying that, but like, there's influence. There's heavy influence in
Sure.
those things that
Yeah.
carry on. And same like I feel having read your book and Pride and Ownership, I feel like Pride and Ownership is a great way to like start like a new guy that knows nothing about the fire service,
Sure.
right? And then your book, I think, comes into like maybe the 3 to 5 year or like about to promote. Like that's a great time to kind of drop that in somebody because
Mhm.
now you understand the little bit of the dance and
Right.
now okay, this is really what things are kind of supposed to be like. So
Hmm.
yeah, I obviously yeah it's a fantastic read for sure.
Well, thank you.
Cody Brooks has got a question here too. So he's saying, have you accomplished everything you set out to do in the fire service? Anything you wish you had done sooner? Which is a great question.
It is a great question. I really wish I went to work for a big city department. I've always wanted to work for a Chicago or an FDNY or something like that. So I wish I would have pursued that a little bit more when I was younger. But I'll be honest with you. God's put a lot of opportunities in my life. I've made a lot of changes. I've worked for 6 organizations. I've really taken some risks, and they've all paid off. So to answer that question, I have far exceeded, and I don't want this to sound arrogant, but never did I think I would write a book. Never did I think I would teach at FDIC. Never did I think I would be exposed to some of the fire service icons that I've been exposed to. So looking back when I first started, and I've always had a vision kind of about the suburban fire service and what being a fireman would be about, but far exceeded my wildest. I mean, my goal was always I just wanted to be a top notch firefighter, a senior man riding backwards. I loved firefighting. I didn't have these goals of I want to hit this promotion at this day, that this year, 2 years, and all that. And the crew that I was with at Engine 22, Randy Stone was my senior man, and we hung together for 10 years in the back of Engine 22. And then as soon as I left, he went to paramedic school and he started promoting and did number one on all the lists. But we were partners, man, and we had a great thing going on, and we didn't want to leave our firehouse and we didn't want to leave our crew. So, but yeah, it far exceeded what I ever thought this ride would be.
Yeah. Um, Early in your career, so I frame this question. I don't think everyone gets an opportunity to thank people early in their career, right? That really had a lot of influence or really even tell them what they really did for them. Is there anybody early in your career that stands out to you that kind of fits that
Early,
mold?
man, my first captain, Ernie Royce, was rock solid. He was a Vietnam vet. He was an aerial door gunner. And Ernie was the only captain that would come down to the academy and watch the burns. And none of the other captains did that. So he came down there and he watched me and he would coach me, and he wanted me to come to his firehouse. So, you know, again, he's not alive, but Ernie really got me started off. He was had very high standards. He wasn't a warm, touchy feely guy, a servant leader, but he was a good fire officer. He had very high expectation and standards, and we had a reputation as a very solid crew. Like I say, Randy Stone was one of my senior men. Bob Ficklin was my first driver, and they all contributed to where I am today. Alan Brunacini certainly had a heavy influence. Bobby Halton influenced me. I tell a story all the time about Pete Lund. When I was riding with him for a short time at Rescue 3, I went up and visited him. Of course, many of them are dead. Randy's not, Bob's not, but probably those guys. Pat McAuliffe was the head of the program at Collin Community College, and he gave me a teaching gig and threw me to the wolves a couple times. And fortunately, I succeeded. I mean, when I was probably 3 years on the hazmat team, he had me teaching degree courses, and I was going to fire departments around the area and teaching the entire fire department. And I probably, if you would have asked me if I was ready for that, I'd say absolutely not. But he saw something in me and gave me those opportunities, and I was just either dumb enough or smart enough to take advantage of them, and they all kind of worked out.
Yeah. So to use an analogy, so how much of that was you pulling up your own chair to the table, and how much of that was them offering you a seat at the table? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think my part was I was very passionate, very, that's all I ever wanted to do. It became my life. And they say don't ever let your job, but I didn't get that message early on. So it truly is my identity. I don't have an exit plan. No, I just think, I worked hard to put myself in positions, and people offered those to me, and I wasn't. You can talk yourself out of anything. And I'll give you an example. My first two jobs after I left Plano, I took a cut in pay, and I was going in the wrong direction. But I always said it was never going to be about money, and it never was. I mean, my first fire chief job in Athens, I was making less than I had made anywhere else, but it was an opportunity to be a fire chief. And not that I wanted to, I never really wanted to be a fire chief, but I thought for the things that I wanted to do in the fire service, that was going to give me the best platform. And so, I took a leap of faith there. So, it's certainly a God thing. I contribute a tremendous amount to my God, and certainly where I am in the colony. So it was just a combination of things. I mean, those are great questions, and that I haven't really thought in depth about. But a lot of people will invest in you if they see you're interested and you're going to follow through and you're going to commit. And sometimes you gotta take a leap of faith and take advantage of those opportunities because they're going to pass you by.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they pretty much just disappear if you don't take
They
them.
do.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. All right. Well, I'm gonna lean into like your specific questions, right? So, the first thing that I want
Yeah.
to talk about, and the phrase in general, is "let firefighters be firefighters." And with that, though, where did you start to develop some of that mindset? Like, and I don't want to spin you towards like a negative thing where it's like, well, this happened to me and I didn't receive that kind of treatment, because I feel like maybe that's not it. But where'd you start to develop that mindset of let firefighters be firefighters?
Well, I mean, you know, EMS is important. And it's much a lot of what we do. And I was very good. I mean, I was only an EMT. I was never a paramedic, but I wrote a paramedic engine company, and I was good at that. I was good at the EMS part, but I always just loved the fire part. And it hurt my fire service soul when I saw the fire service start to drift farther and farther and farther from our mission, and really put fire on the back burner. Starting in 1986, just about every year except for COVID and maybe missing here or there, I would go at least once a year someplace in the country and ride with what I called a high performance fire company, a rescue company, squad companies, engine companies. This past summer, I rode with Mo Davis and Clyde Gordon. Went down in Houston, and so all that and like I said, I always had this vision in my head, and it probably started back with the volleys in New York of what I thought being a firefighter should represent, what it should look like. And probably the one of the reasons why I've worked with so many organizations, I've been chasing this vision. So I had it really very early on, and now that I've been given, probably the reason I got the keynote at FDIC is because I challenge the status quo, and I think outside the box, not because I'm brilliant, not because I'm smart. I just look at things a different way, and I don't let people talk me out of those things unless there's good justification. I don't fall to peer pressure. I don't follow what the mainstream is doing unless I understand it. And so for things to work, they got to make sense in my head. And so, when I got to the colony, we have a fire first preparedness philosophy, and we have no, we don't, unapologetic. And we even have single role paramedic staff in our ambulances so our firefighters can ride the heavy fire apparatus. And so to me, that just makes sense. And I don't know if anybody really pointed it out or taught me that or coached or mentored me on it. It just made sense. And let firefighters be firefighters, and they'll do great things. And I think, and this wasn't intentional, but it's paid tremendous dividends on our recruitment and retention. And we attract a very specific type of firefighter that loves to train, that's a very aggressive mindset, and they're committed to doing a really good job. And so all that kind of plays into it.
Yeah, and I think at least what I've noticed is firefighters in most like suburban smaller apartments like mine, under 100 members.
Yeah.
There are people that are EMS people and there's people that are fire people, and I feel like that just lends itself to single role like you're talking about. Like it is kind of a natural progression, right? There's guys on my department, which whatever, that will say like, I hope I never go to a fire again. Well then maybe this thing's better for you. Maybe you
Right.
should
Right.
just do this. And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
some guys are stellar paramedics, and that's what they should do, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, like you said, it's just going against the flow and or against the grain, I guess, and doing
And
something
there's a
different.
lot of really good firemen and paramedics out there,
Yeah,
firefighters, but there's also a lot where one is above the other, and so the other suffers.
yeah,
And so, I just believe, I mean, we're professionals, and you look at any professional organization, and you have positional players. You know, there's a pitcher, there's a first baseman, there's a quarterback, there's a wide receiver. Even in law enforcement, you have your snipers and all those. But in the fire service, for some reason, we got in this mindset that everybody should do it. I mean, even Roy and Johnny stayed on the squad. They didn't ride the engine much, but we started to talk about quint concepts, and we take on more and more stuff. And the chiefs just say, "Hey, well, you should be able to do it." And I don't mean this at a dig at all, but a majority of our organization has a high school diploma, maybe some college. They're typically blue collar. They've worked and done stuff, and then we ask them to be chemists and doctors and fire protection engineers. And I just think that something always suffers. It may not be noticeable, and you may get through a whole career, but nobody has been able to explain the science of how we do our staffing and given any kind of proof or data that says this is the best way. Now, I can provide you data on our single role paramedics and our firefighters that proves we are delivering a higher level of pre-hospital care. And the way our fire operations work, our fires, we don't make a ton of them, but we go to them, they go pretty damn good.
Yeah. I mean, you said it best about positional players. That's a great analogy to explain that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Greg Van Ham, he's saying, Chief, can you talk about how you came up with the single role paramedic for the colony and how you use them on fire scenes?
Sure, and that's a great question. And it kind of was a fluke deal. So we were opening two firehouses in about an 18-month, 24-month period, very close together. And our whole organization, everybody's a paramedic. So everybody's a firefighter paramedic. Well, in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, they're a commodity. It's very, very hard to get quality firefighter paramedics. And I needed to hire 30 of them. And so we started talking about, okay, doing a general hire off the street. Well, if we did that, if we brought in 30 brand new people to our organization with no experience, we'd have fire companies with no experience. So we couldn't do that. I went to my council about hiring firefighter EMTs and sending them to paramedic school, and they didn't like that idea. So we said, well, why don't we look at the first hiring was going to be 18, and we have 3 ambulances. So that would have been what we needed to staff all our ambulances. So we had one hiring for a firehouse of all single role paramedics. And so when we did the first, there's nothing like that. There's a couple departments that do it now, but when we did it, we were like the only ones in Texas. So we got this tremendous turnout, and we got some really, really high because we don't have any nursing homes in our city. You know, that's an oddity. We don't do any transport, so it's all 911 calls. And I think our paramedics now are starting at like $78,000, and they're getting city benefits. So we got some of the best out there. And so that's really how it started, was a need to fill the staffing. And then what we found out is when we went to hire for Firehouse 5, we saw a greater number of firefighter paramedics because they knew they weren't going to have to ride the ambulance that much. On the average, our firefighter paramedics ride the ambulance about every 4 to 6 weeks, one time every 4 to 6 weeks. We didn't hire any extra single role paramedics. So when one is off, a firefighter, because we want them to stay familiar with the ambulance.
Yeah.
So how we use them on the fire scene, and this has been a work in progress. We send an ambulance on a one alarm structure fire. And then as soon as they declare it a working fire, we send a second one. So the first one gets there, and the driver, whoever they decide that day, will report to command. We don't have command techs or battalion drivers. So they go up there and they're the scribe, and they're great at report taking. So they track everybody. They can talk on channel 1. They don't talk on the fire channel. So if the colony calls for a fill in, they can answer that radio. They know how to run our pack tracker. They're going to learn how to fly our tethered drone. So they play at the one position, plays a support role. The other medic pulls the cot out, puts all the crap on it that they think they're going to need in case a firefighter goes down or they have a burn victim. And then they have a video camera and they start videoing the fire. So that's how we utilize. And then the second medic gets on scene and they're committed to rehab, taking care, because about that time our first crews are coming out and they set up rehab and take the vital signs and do all the reporting and tracking.
That medic that drops the camera. So is that just like game film, and you guys review that basically?
Yeah, just so we have it, and if we want to put some stuff out on social media. But yeah, it's just that for training, and we hear our communications and just kind of how to we have a very strict engine and truck deployment model, and our engine guys do engine work, our truck guys do truck work, and very rarely do the two switch over. Our squad can do engine or truck work. So it's just like game film. We watch it, we see how everything comes together, and it's so tightly choreographed that it just kind of gives us a real time impression of how the first 5 minutes really go.
Yeah. Who processes, like, if so for training purposes and review? Who would process that video and then present it out? Like,
It's the EMS chief typically. The EMS chief will get it from his single role paramedics, and he'll clean it up, look at it, then he'll send it to the battalion chiefs. We pull the radio traffic, and then we do a hot wash kind of while we're still on scene, and then the next shift or two after, they'll do a little formal after action review or PIA post incident analysis and put all that together.
Greg says thanks for the answer. And
Sure.
so, how much have you noticed that there's been like positive changes from actually being able to review all the film like that, where maybe you've picked up
Yeah.
on operational things that you've tweaked that you've noticed now?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have some guys that wear GoPros.
Yeah.
We say it's okay to do that. So yeah, the videos really do help. Make sure our size up is matching the conditions and making sure we're pulling the right lines, making the decisions. We do a lot of vertical vent, and so we're always looking for that coordination, making sure that we're coordinating ventilation, fire attack, and search. And we have numbers and all that. And we call out those benchmarks on the radio. So we're making sure that all that is reconciled and in sync with one another.
No, that's really cool. I feel like having that is invaluable for getting better,
Yeah.
especially like a
Yeah.
department that doesn't run a ton of fires, right? Like
Right.
uh, what you do run, you should review in
Yeah.
that way. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, with letting firefighters be firefighters, and I'll keep it easier for you. So, what would you say three traits are of that like firefighters, right? What are you when you say letting firefighters be firefighters? What is that really explaining? Like, what do you think firefighters are?
Passion, preparedness, and professionalism. We have a preparedness standard: mental, physical, mechanical, procedural. So every day we want you to have that mindset. So we're big on preparation. We want you to have the passion to be a firefighter and love the job, and it's okay to love the job. And we have a lot of like-minded people, and then to be a professional, and I use a book that I read, Tony Kern's Going Pro, and in that book he defines three levels of professionalism. A level one is somebody who's just competent enough to work there or be a member if you're in a volunteer. A level two professional is somebody who's going to become whatever the environment expects from them. If they're a high performance fire company, they're going to be a high performer. They go to the other way, they're going to become a mope. But the highest level of professionalism is somebody who's committed to continual improvement. So that's part of it too. Is we want our firefighters to remain relevant. We train all the time. We try the latest and greatest as far as our hose package. We just totally redesigned our engines. We just ordered a tiller, and those are all designed by the guys that do the work. And so I think those are the three big things, right there. You said three, but I would say preparedness, professionalism, and passion for the
No,
job.
yeah, that's great. It's a great way to describe it for sure. Um, with culture, so obviously there's a time to in your position, like as a fire chief or really any administrator, right? There's a time for you to be the one doing the growth, and then there's a time to let it grow on its own. What would you say? Would you agree with that? And then what would you say would kind of be those lines and kind of the lanes that you'd stay in with those things?
Well, a lot of fire chiefs define success if they're building and buying. If they're spending money, they look at that as success. Now, they never look at the back end of it to see what the return is on that investment. They buy a rig and they forget about it. They open a firehouse. And I look at things just the opposite. I'm all about performance. And then we will buy things to make us. The fire department's a system. And I talk about it in terms of its capabilities and limitations, right? And so, if things are going well, if things are in line, whatever, the culture is what the organization values. So if the organization is valuing the right thing, then just let it happen. The chief before me, he was a quint concept guy, and that never made sense to me. And so I knew that was going to be a change in mindset. And I did something. I put out, I call the first generation was called the Excellent Vision and Professional Standards. And what I did, it was kind of a shortcut. I hate to say that, but I'd worked for so many organizations that I went to the colony, and I was trying to think of kind of a high speed, low drag to get going in the direction. So I put this document together gave it to my shift commanders. I said, this isn't a policy or procedure. You're not going to be tested on it. But if you want to get inside my head, here it is. And one by one, they came in and they appreciated it, and not as much for the content, but for the first time, they had something where they could really describe the long game. If we're going to ask you guys to do these things, this is the why. And a lot of that had to do with culture. And so that was kind of our culture blueprint, if you will. And today, our promotional, our probationary, our NDOC, all of that has excerpts from that document. So it's truly become part of us. But if you want the organization to value something different than it currently does, that's a culture change. And so it just depends if you're happy. Every organization has a culture. There's no such thing as a cultureless organization. And you got two choices. You can accept the culture that is going to exist and hope it's a good one, or you can pursue a chosen culture. And that's what we decided to do. And I think, and this is not a Scott Thompson thing. It's just because somebody will come in and mess it up. But if I think you asked our guys, what the number one thing on their mind is, other than pay and benefits, it's protecting the culture that they've worked so hard to build. And they don't want some chief from the outside coming in, because what's probably going to happen, you hire a chief from the outside and he's going to get rid of the single role paramedic program. Because if he sends them all to fire school, we'll get an ISO 1. That's what kept us from getting an ISO 1. If he doesn't buy into positional firefighting, we're going to go back to everybody does everything, and he'll have a mutiny on his hands. And so the guys have seen the results of how that works, and they want to protect it, and they want it to grow. So, so the answer would be is if the culture is valuing the things that you want it to value, sail on. If not, there's got to be a deliberate and intentional effort to change it.
And so, I mean, how much of that comes in formal settings like policy, and then how much of that comes in like day-to-day informal kind of changes? Like, I know in your book, the training binder, you mentioned you printed it, you delivered it, and then when you stopped doing that, you noticed there was a fall off, so you went back to it. Right?
Good for you. You read the book.
Oh, of course I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, with that, like, I think that's a perfect analogy for kind of where I'm coming from with that is where do you find the differences between those things, and how do you maximize your efforts as a leader?
So the first indication of what the culture is how people talk about themselves internally and how people talk about you externally. So the first indication of what the culture is in casual conversation, sitting around the kitchen table and listening to the guys describe what I call the cultural sparks: leadership, supervision, psychological safety, work design, firehouse norms, right? And so that's the first sign. So if you hear the conversation and it truly values the things that we want to value, that means we're on the right track. And it takes about 18 to 24 to 36 months to change a culture, right? But how do people from the outside look at you? Those are all important things. So you listen, you pay attention to that stuff. And then you play into, I have another saying is you got to start with the end in mind, and that's defining that vision of success. And so you want that vision of success to become part of the chosen culture. But you got to make sure your mission is a working mission statement. You got to make sure your core values have action steps. You got to make sure your purpose statement is accurate. All those things are telling a story, and they've got to complement one another. And that's why a lot of fire departments get in trouble. Their things that they have in place contradict one another. So nobody is committing to one way. People are committing to a bunch of different ways depending on which one they feel more comfortable with. If I hear a department, like say us, 5 firehouses and 3 shifts, and they say we have 15 different ways of doing things, that tells me they don't have a chosen culture and they don't have any standards. They're not bad people. They're not bad departments. That's a majority of the American Fire Service. But they're not moving in one direction. And so, I say part of my daily responsibility is I manage the culture daily, and I take it very seriously. And we want to stay on this path, and we want to take advantage of momentum when we have it and make corrections when we see the need. So there's a lot of things that go into it. There's not one list. It's just an awareness of how the organization feels about themselves and how people outside look at you.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to echo too what you said. 18 to 24 months to change a culture. I think that again needs to be regularly heard. Right? People, we're firefighters. Firefighters want like instant, fixes with a lot of things because that's what we do. Right? We go in, we solve the problem, and a lot of people
And
don't think about that.
since culture represents what you value, you've got to have one budget cycle in there. You've got to have one budget cycle that prioritizes the projects and the things that you're doing. So that's why it's got to be longer than 12 months because most budget cycles are 12 months. So you've got to have a few months prior to that budget preparation and then a few months afterwards to implement those programs. And then you got to evaluate if they're sustainable. And if they are, then you run with it. And so you try to get as many people on board as you can early on, the people that are influencers in the organization, so that they go out and they're selling this, they're helping you sell this chosen culture. So there's just a lot of moving parts. But the big thing is just an awareness of it. Most fire departments, and part of the officer training that I do, I talk about a discovery phase where, as leaders, formal and informal, we really have to learn what's influencing our organizations. And you probably read in the book where we did the Colony Project. That was an effort to really understand our organization and what influences our organization. And once you understand all those influences, you can start to manage them. But most fire departments don't. They don't even really think about culture. Their mission statement is hanging up on the wall, and an engine boss or truck boss will read it and have no idea what their role is in fulfilling it. So that's a waste. They have these core values, but nobody lives by them. So all those things come into play. They've all got to complement one another for you to get some forward momentum.
Yeah, I'm not bashing my place, but we say they're just words on a
Oh,
table. Like we've got our core values or whatever, and we have a nice table that someone made, and it's got our logos and it's all this, and
yeah.
the words are there, but they're not really bought, and they're not bad words. They're great words to live
Right.
by, right? But they're not chosen, right? They're not bought in by, or people aren't buying into that as much as they
I've got
could.
guys who've incorporated our core values into their tattoos.
Yeah,
We hold each other accountable. Ours are duty, respect, and integrity. And duty is to the mission, right? It's that mission mindset. Taking an oath, you're committing to duty. Respect is, respect for one another, respect for the traditions of the American Fire Service, respect for other fire departments, other agencies, and then integrity. I define integrity a little different than other people. I define integrity as, and it came from, it was an early president that I read it and I liked it, but I don't remember who it was. But integrity is dependable in any role or situation. And when we have the deployment model that we have, if one person doesn't do his job, a lot of people are going to pay the price for that. And so we preach that and we say, hey, if you're stretching the first line, that's a pretty big freaking deal. We want you to be an expert at it. If you're going to the roof, that engine crew is going to suffer if you don't get there in time. And so we have that mindset to where we're playing on the same sheet of music. We're an orchestra and we're all reading off the same sheet of music. And we have to do that to operate the way that we do.
are those core values worked into your promotional process or your hiring
Oh yeah.
process? Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's from
Yeah.
the get go. Like this is what we're about. You need to fit this mold, or you're just not going to be successful here,
We
right?
always ask some form of, these are our core values. Tell me what they mean to you and tell me a time that you acted those out in your previous deal. And then in the promotion, this is interesting. 2 years ago, the organization came to me, two of my highly respected captains, and wanted to change up our promotional process to be more reflective of our core values. So we do a peer evaluation as part of our promotional process. And that peer evaluation is all about the core values. Do they just give it lip service or do the guys live it?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's how it
They
should
have a
be.
tremendous
Hmm.
influence in our organization.
Well, and it's so easy to reflect back to the same benchmark every time. I know you talk about defining excellence. It's the same
Yeah.
thing, right? It's consistent.
And
Mike,
that's true north. And if you don't have that, what is if you don't have a good mission statement and you don't have core values, if it's supported at the top, those motivate and unite.
Yeah.
They motivate the organization and they unite them, get them to come together. If you don't have that, what do you have? What is motivating your people and what are they focusing on?
Yeah, and even when mission statements became like a hot thing, what, like in probably the 90s, like early 90s,
Yeah,
maybe
we
late
stole it from
80s,
the
right?
private, from the private sector. We got to have these, and
Right. And
fire chiefs want to get more creative so they impress their peers. They don't care about having something workable for their members. They want to impress other fire chiefs. Something on their webpage that looks super progressive. It doesn't work like that.
yeah, like it actually is supposed to have meaning. That's the point in
Yeah,
a mission
yeah,
statement, right? And I know, like, at least in my short time in the fire service, like, I only remember my current one right now because none of them really had like an
right,
actual measurable thing where it was what we did. It was a spirit of core. It was those things. Like,
right,
and the reason I
right.
know mine now is because I try to at least understand it on my department, right?
Yeah.
And
And does it make sense to you?
well, it's to care for and protect our community, which makes sense to me,
Okay.
but
Okay.
there's not a lot of meat on that bone either. It's
Right.
kind of
Right.
just a boilerplate. Pluck that one out of the internet and slap it on and put our logo on it. It just doesn't have like anything to it. And so, do I wish there was more? Probably, but at the same
Well, as
time,
long as you understand it, though, ours
yeah,
is save lives, protect property, solve problems, bring order to chaos, manage risk, and initiate the recovery process. So it's a full load,
yeah,
full, and that's modified. That's even changed a little bit from the one in the book because we do these things called captains camps, and we just did the Colony Project too. So we're still defining ourselves, and we're trying to get it down to a micro level of understanding and ownership so the people really buy into it.
yeah. I think
But
like
it's your true north. If you don't have core values, what's your true north?
yeah, there's nothing to reflect back on, and there's
Right.
nothing to hold. So like even like the most junior person on the fire department should be able to know those core values, and when someone's not acting within those core values, be able to essentially call somebody out on it, right? And be able to have
But
a
we fail
leg
to
to
make the
stand on.
connection. We fail to make the connection that when our new members raise their right hand, what that means. That means I'm buying into the mission. I'm buying into the core values. I'm entering a tribe that has this specific set of rules and guiding principles, and I'm going to do all that I can to be a contributing member of the tribe. But we just say raise your right hand, and we don't make that connection. I was doing a class not long ago, and one of the students said, maybe we should have our people take an oath every year. And I said, that's a pretty damn good idea because you're going to refresh them every year as to why you're doing this job.
Yeah. Or like kind of what you're saying too is everything connects to everything. So if your oath reflects your
Yeah,
core values, reflects your mission statement, like
yeah,
it is just constantly woven into everything you do. Mud flaps on the trucks, house
everything.
logos,
Yeah.
everything when it all connects together, like that's
Yeah.
what it should be. Josh Everett's you're putting quarters in me, and this is obviously my jam, which is why I having you on here. I love talking about this stuff. But
Good. I do too.
Joshua Everett's he's asking what does your captain's camp consist of?
So they're just we kind of look for needs. They're usually 3 days in length. We just did one, and we kind of changed the format up. I think what we're going to stick with now is we come in and we do the Chiefs do a little morning presentation. I typically start it off, and then the afternoon it's all about the captains. We talk about what's on their mind, so they get a little bit of input from admin, and then we hear all their concerns and stuff. And so that's really what it is. But you think about it, if you do it's just like anything else. If you learn in the academy to cut a roof and throw a ladder, you can't go a whole career without doing those things, or you're going to forget them. And there's science that talk about how you lose skill and knowledge. So you do officer development training, you got to have those refreshers. And so our captains, even though we don't have a solid officer development program yet, we're working on it. They're just kind of refreshers to get us back on track, get us refocused, um, talk about the things that are
Uh oh. I think we lost him there for a minute. While I try to get this going again. Sorry, everyone. I had a he was chopping a little bit before, and I had a feeling that was gonna happen. Let me work some background nerd magic here to make that happen again. But oh, there he is. Hey, Chief.
Everything's frozen.
Yeah, maybe I can. I'm frozen for you.
Yeah, we're both frozen.
Oh,
Let's see what refreshing does here. Yeah, I don't know what to do here.
I don't even know what to do.
I'm frozen and you're frozen. Both of us are frozen.
Maybe I can close it and then. Oh, jeez. Is it? Can you leave? Is it possible for you to leave?
Yeah, I can. I'm gonna need all those codes to get back on.
Oh yeah, we got that. Don't worry. I'll.
Want me to click out and go back on?
Yeah, give it a shot.
All right. Okay, I'm out.
And then.
Come back. Yeah, I don't. Both I'm locked up. Otherwise, it would show just one of our bandwidths on one side is. Okay, so I'm at the join meeting. What's our meeting ID number again?
All right, hold on.
That was the long one, the longer one.
Oh yeah, I gotta find that thing again. Here we go.
45 minutes are up. Did you pay your bill on Zoom?
I know. Is that what it? Zoom went. Nope, you're done.
Maybe they said you checked that.
So much for that. Oh come on, where's that?
I should have wrote it down.
I no, I'm thinking the same thing that I should have done the. I should have wrote it down. Be right back, people.
There we go. How's that? Can you hear me?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay. All right. Sorry
Woo.
about that, folks. We both locked up.
I'm telling you, Zoom was waiting for that. They heard me joking about their 45-minute limit. You're right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
screw this guy. I don't even remember where we left off, so I'll just roll to the next thing. But unless somebody in our chat here can remind me, because I was in a totally different world trying to unmess this up. So if one of you guys can remind us what we were talking about, I'd appreciate it. But I am going to move into talking about macro culture. So like I had said before, and we had that little discussion, and I wanted to expand upon it, and partially selfishly, it's because I feel like the firemen that I'm around a lot in my area is lacking in that connection to the macro culture. And I want to kind of just ask you again what I already did ask you in that other setting, and that was, what can you do with an organization that's not connected to the macro culture to try to connect them to the macro culture?
So let's talk about all the levels of culture in an organization. There's the macro culture, was the American Fire Service, right? And typically it's the chief who decides what they want to adopt from that. And none of us really have a lot of influence over that culture. we can just adopt the Maltese cross, bells on our rings. Then we have the organizational culture. And so the chief really has the greatest influence of the organizational culture because he or she defines the priorities, where the money's spent, how people are recognized, how they're disciplined. And then we go to the subcultures, which are the supervisors, the shifts, the battalions, and then the microculture, which is the firehouse. So the question you're kind of asking is how do we connect the microculture with the macro culture? And there's a couple steps in between. And I'm very fortunate to work with a boss. Like we still buy our guys leather helmets. A leather helmet now costs about $1,400, and I can buy a composite helmet for 300, right? But my boss says if that helps connect them to the American Fire Service, if that's something they're going to be proud of, and it's going to give them an identity, then that's money well spent. And so little things like that. But you want your people to understand why we have those things. We always say we respect the good traditions of the American Fire Service. Everybody's going to black over red rigs and all these crazy colors. Our rigs are still red and white. They're old traditional color. We just totally redesigned our pumpers, and they're back to an old hose wagon style where it just does engine work. And so, every one of us has a leadership and an operational philosophy. And in those philosophies, they really determine through our principles, through our experiences, what we value personally. It's kind of like the culture is to the organization. So, a lot of chiefs that don't care about their tradition. They think traditions hold us back. So that macro culture is not going to be representative of the American Fire Service. And therefore the micro culture not even exposed to it, right? But I mean, and let's go back to Rick's book, Pride and Ownership. Right? That's the macro culture. Um, right there, the things, the rituals, the routines, the things that we do. And so, you could go through his book and pick out the things that you want to become part of your organization. I still think you can do it at the micro level. Some chiefs don't want you to put any pictures up, but if you allow your people to put up pictures of their fires and let them have a company logo and all those things, that's all part of it. And so it's just kind of defining the why and what parts of it you want to bring into your organization. It's not complicated. It's a lot of times just having the discussion and then making a commitment and pursuing it and having the patience and the sustainability to see it through.
So I remember that was the advice that you had given. Again, I got a real short time to talk to you in that setting, and it was basically like talk about it and pictures and right, just make it part of the conversation. And I got assigned a probationary guy. He's almost done. He's actually done in like 10 days. No, whatever. He's close. And awesome kid. He came from an EMS background, so I was kind of like, oh boy, here we go. Like it, and I had kind of dealt with that before, and it was tough for me to show him things. And totally different. I mean, this kid lights out. And one of the things, I took that advice and we just started talking about the fire service. And then he went to FDIC this year. He paid out of his own pocket, paid to go because he started. And I
that's awesome.
I saw exactly what you had talked about work, and it was we just went to firemanship together, and I see him talking
That's
to Ray
awesome.
McCormick about nozzles. Like, what a crazy full circle, like 10 months to see that happen just by having conversation. And yes, he had to be the right person that wanted to listen to it and that kind of stuff. And as I've gotten older, I'm more patient in the way that I sell things, so I think that helped a little bit. But I just wanted to share your advice works.
Yeah.
I can.
Well, I'm glad I told a consistent story, but
Yeah.
and this is kind of we're connected. We're blessed. We get to hang around with cool people. There are people in the fire service. You say Ray McCormick, they have no idea who he is. They don't know who John Norman is. They don't know who Dave McGrail is. They don't know those people. They're just totally disconnected from anything outside of their organization. So they have zero. They probably have a Maltese cross somewhere, and they probably have a rank structure that they've adopted from the American service macro culture, but that's about it. And so, there's a lot of things we can do to instill that in our people. And your story is awesome. Now you got a kid that's going to firemanship and going to FDIC, and he's going to see more and more. This organization, whatever you put in, the return will be tenfold, and I'm convinced of that. If you put in a little, you're not going to get much back. You put in a lot, and you were gonna multiply that. Just we just brought Tim Klett in, and he did 3 days, but he was here for 4 days. Well, hell, just the time we spent after having dinner and just talking and just getting to know each other's worlds. I mean, that's huge. That's what I love about this. And we didn't even know each other before that, and now it's somebody I would call if I have a question and hope to keep in touch with. And so a lot of guys are turned off by that. They want to do their 24 or 48 hours and go, and that's okay. But there's just so much more out here. If you look at that occupational culture and all the cool things that are going on in the America. And there's some cool books coming out. Frank Lieb and Billy Goldfeder, the 30 Fires You Must Know. That's going to be a history lesson.
Yeah.
Things like that are just super cool.
Yeah, and it only helps give people.
I don't know if I answered the question, but I've been around the bush a lot.
No, you did, and really, like, this is loose. I whatever answers you give, it is what it is. But what was I gonna say? That book, that's a great way to kind of start. You can present that to a junior guy that maybe doesn't know about those historical things, and
Yeah.
it's just another piece to be able to put in front of somebody. I think the hardest sobering thing is sometimes you can't be a prophet in your own community, right? And so, like, having other resources to kind of still give that same message, and you kind of put it in front of them, and then you let them think it's their idea. Like, that stuff does work. It just
And a majority of our fire codes come, there's people who don't know anything about Hackensack Ford
Yeah.
or the Beverly Hills Supper Club or Iroquois Theater or the Shirtway, 750 Adams in Memphis. All these things that when I went to the academy, you learned them and you study them. And there's a generation now that knows nothing about them. The Happy Land, all these fires. And so I'm glad to see that book. I wish I would have thought of it, but those are things we got to remember. Why we have panic bars on our doors, why they swing open, and all these. There's a variety of codes that came from these what Angel of Our Lady. It was that was
Our Lady
called
of
Angel
Angels.
Our Lady of Angel Fire.
Yeah.
All those things produced things that we live with today, additives to natural gas and all those other things. So it's important we understand where that comes from.
Yeah, and I don't know why. It just seemed like I know that all of those obviously they existed and there was resources, but that book that those guys are putting out, like, again, that's just such an easy way to present now to somebody where you're not digging through 3 different books to get all these different historical
Sit down and read it and let's talk about
Right.
it. It's a great mentoring tool. Read a Fire and Night while you're in the academy or whatever, and let's have a talk about it.
Yeah, and like I think I'm gonna try to push it again, but like, so our probationary program we changed, and it involves now they have to research. I think it's 3 line of duty deaths, and I think and then they present it to the shift, and we were almost thinking about trying to work this into that, like a historical fire. This is where the changes came from. This is why we do what we do. Like, just trying to trick them while we get 12 months where they can't say no. That was kind of the thought, was like, at least in that time period, like, we could trick them into being researchers, and it's worked.
Start them off
well.
right.
Yeah. I wish
That's
I
a great
had that
idea.
when I was young. Like, I'm a second gen, but like, my dad was very good
Me too.
about not putting his ideas into me and letting me figure it
Right.
out. And so, like, when I started as a volunteer, that was not part of, like, anything. We didn't we talked about in our town the historical fires,
Right.
but like,
Right.
not major ones. And so I missed a huge chunk of that for years until people would start saying things like, just talking about them. I'd be clueless. And for the longest time, I had a running list on my phone of, like, I have no idea what that is. And I would type it in, and then I would try to remember them and look them up. But that book, again, I'm really excited. I
We
have
got
it
a whole
sitting on the
generation
shelf.
that doesn't know anything about 9/11.
I know.
mean, that just blows my mind. They know nothing about it.
I'm
Oh,
not
some
that
plane
old, but
crashed into a building.
yeah,
That's all they know.
yeah. My probationary guy, he was not born before 9/11. Like that,
So it's history to him.
I
It's
know.
before his time.
And I think that was a sobering. Like that was the first one for me. Like I've only been in the fire service for 14 years, so like that. I mean, yeah, there's been historical things that have happened, but like that's obviously that's a major one, and for
Oklahoma City bombing,
yeah.
all those are big ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think that talking about it, like you said, that connection to the macro culture starts to kind
Yeah.
of put those pieces into place, right? And then maybe people start to think a little bit more. Um, so one thing I think I've noticed about your leadership style and kind of what you've been doing over at the colony has been kind of like providing people with like environments to be passionate about their thing. I think like the single roles and all that other stuff works into that. What was it like getting that kind of thing moving and is it like an active thing that you do, or is it just you see an opportunity and jump on it? Because I feel like that's kind of in what you're doing is those
It's a
opportunities.
daily thing. It's
Yeah.
got to become part of your fabric. So the first big thing that I wanted to do when I got here, because I wasn't comfortable, was move away from the Quint concept. And we didn't have a truck company. I mean, we repurposed one of our old Quints, and I went out to all the firehouses and I said, okay, this is the vision, and who wants to be on this truck company? And nobody had any truck experience, so we had to start out and we had to learn that. But I think there's always those opportunities, and you got to pay attention to them. But you always got to challenge yourself, not just to build and buy and spend money, but how can we be more connected to the mission? And I talk about, like I said earlier, capabilities and limitations. And we always should try to maximize the capabilities of the system and minimize the limitations. And so, I always say the greatest investment made in any fire department organization is fire suppression and fire rescue capability. In other words, your department, my department, that's where we spend the most money. Fire trucks, fire hose, SCBAs, firefighters, thermal imagers, nozzles, all that. So if that's where the greatest investment is, we better be damn good at that when we go out the door. If you go to one fire a year, that's a big deal to that one person who hosts that fire. But if we're giving all that money, we can't put it on the back burner. We got to be the fire professionals. And so it's just connecting those dots. And but I think every day there's opportunities to either reinforce the chosen culture or to modify where there's some necessity. And it's something you got to stick with, because if we've planted roots now, and I think our culture will remain the same unless somebody comes in and actively tries to change it. I think it's self-sufficient now, but it took a long time to get there.
when when you see like new things that you're going to do in your organization or changes that are going to be made, do you see like people latch onto that and then just let them run with it, or do you kind of have an idea when you're going to do something new about who would be successful leading something? Like how much of it is led by your administration, I guess, and how much of it is led by the firefighters?
Well, my administration is very loyal. So we spend a lot of time talking about it before it ever is pushed out. I have a kitchen table in my office, and every morning we're sitting around talking, and we're always trying to solve problems or challenges. So we do a lot of homework. So we have not all the answers. We have a lot of answers before we push it out. And I can tell you on both of those changes, going to the engine and truck deployment model, there was one shift, B shift, they didn't want any part of it, to where the battalion chief, we'd go to a meeting, he says, we're not doing any of that crap. And then they had a fire where it bit him in the ass, and he came back and he said, okay, I get it. A kid didn't know how to start a saw and all that. And then when I went to the single role paramedic, people thought I was insane. There was like, no way is this going to work, chief. And I had to play the old trust me card. And when you do that, you can't let your ego get in the way. You can't push a bad thing until it fails miserably. I had to be willing, and we hired our medics 6 at a time. We did 6, 6, and 6. So if the first 6 didn't work, we could cut our losses and not hire any more. And so that's part of the planning phase. But we try to get our people involved as much as we can. Like when we redesigned our engines, that was 100% done by the firefighters. They designed artillery. We just ordered a walk-in rescue. They've done all that. So they do the stuff that is going to affect their job. We try to get them to really take a lot of ownership and get involved in that.
Yeah, and you give them the opportunity then to be
Oh yeah,
passionate about it. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, One of the things I hear come up, so the single role paramedics kind of float around the conversation in my area, right? And hiring's not that good in my area right now. Retention's terrible in my area right
That's the whole
now,
country.
right? And so,
That's the whole
yeah,
country.
and yeah, you're right. So that's definitely not exclusive to my area, but one of the conversations about single role becomes that the pay, and one of the questions that always comes up is, well, the ambulance guys are going to be doing 80% of the work, while the fire guys are not going to be doing as much work. Why should the fire guys and the EMS guys get paid the same? What would you say to that kind of logic, and what's your thought process on some of that?
We never that's never even come up
That's
with us.
awesome.
So our rank structure is single role paramedic, firefighter, paramedic up the line. So the argument to that would be, well, firefighters are dual role paramedics, so they've got to do the paramedic job plus the fire job. But the other part you got to remember is those medics are still going to be single role paramedics with a private EMS company or whatever. So we're giving them an opportunity to get paid more, to get city benefits, just make 911. So we're giving them an opportunity. We're not putting a gun to anybody's head. And when they come in the organization, this is your deal. You are a single role medic. This is what you're going to do a majority of the work, but you're doing it right now. You're just doing it all. So to me, that's not even an argument. That's not even a discussion. If I was pulling people off the street or taking guys off the fire truck and putting them on an ambulance and cutting their pay, but we're giving them an opportunity that doesn't exist. And we just implemented a career track. So now our single role paramedics have a promotional track so that we can now make it a career instead of just a really cool job. But that conversation, doesn't come up. They don't. Our turnaround times are very quick. Our hospitals are right there, so the guys aren't back in bed much before the ambulance gets back. But they take ownership. That's what they want to
Yeah.
do. And if they want to ride the fire truck, they can cross over or put into crossover.
Yeah, so there's
So
a path for them, right, to grow into the fire if they
yeah,
want to.
yeah,
What's the promoted
yeah.
position for single role medic then?
So the first one is FTP, field training paramedic, and that's equivalent to our apparatus operators. We don't have lieutenants on the fire side. We have a captain, so we just created an EMS lieutenant position, and then they have access to the division chief of EMS. So there's two promotions that a majority can get, and then they can test or be considered for the division chief of EMS.
And does that division chief then, is that Dave's position? Is that a
Yeah,
car and
yeah,
all that fun stuff,
yep,
right?
yep,
And so
yep.
they,
Part of the leadership team.
okay. So like,
Now, right now, I have a firefighter paramedic in that role.
okay.
I have a but probably the next one, I had a candidate, Stephen Wilcox. He's a lieutenant that I would have been very comfortable giving him the job, but that role still has to do some fire stuff, like they're over our PPE and stuff. So, and I wanted him to come through the ranks instead of skip them. But I feel pretty confident when my current division chief leaves, the next it'll be filled by and I want them to have a seat at the table.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And part of my ignorance, but with Texas, and unions and all that stuff, how are they under a contract? Do you guys have a union? How does that work?
No, we're right to work state.
Okay.
So they're all part of our association. We have a local.
Yes.
You got to pay them a little differently, and that's regulated by federal law. You can't pay them like a firefighter. But yeah, they're part of the union, and I don't know if the news made it there, but Fort Worth Fire Department just took over MedStar in Fort Worth, so
Oh,
they're bringing on 400 single role paramedics, and they're civil service. So we're waiting to see how they fit them into civil service. We're not civil service. We're
yeah.
right to work state, so we don't have contracts or any of that.
That's interesting. I have a buddy on Fort Worth. I might have to ask him about that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
it's interesting because
Yeah.
they're bringing in 400 single role paramedics.
Wow. Uh,
Dallas implemented the program.
what's their timeline?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a crazy number.
Yeah, yeah.
But I get so when you talk about the single role, like I have a friend who he was lights out medic. He worked for a private ambulance company. He was fantastic paramedic, and the department I worked for at the time, they had a rescue squad and a fire department. There's a whole other story with that I'm definitely not going to get into. But he worked on the other side of that, and then when that started to dissolve, he missed 911, right? He missed like actual
Right.
emergency paramedicine. So he tried to go to
Right.
the fire academy, and he made it. He wasn't the most athletic dude, so it definitely wasn't like a thing that he was going to be good at. But it was his way to kind of get back into that. And then doing both roles just didn't work for him. And I always think about him because, like,
Yeah.
when people tell me, "Well, nobody wants to be a paramedic," that's complete crap. Like,
It
there are
is.
people
It
that
is.
do, and
We got flight medics. We
yeah,
got single role medics that fly the helicopters.
right,
They're in the military. One of my single role paramedics just got a second year, got a program accepted at FDIC. He's presenting at FDIC, and he's trying to push our aggressive fire culture to an aggressive EMS response. And he got us the Sino kits and all that. So
yeah.
they're doing amazing stuff.
I mean, not. I mean, you could take a nurse that's working 12-hour shifts and be like, "Hey, you can come in here for
Yeah.
24 hours," and why would you not want to do that?
If you
If
don't
that's
have to
you,
use them on the fire ground to fight fire, there's no downside.
yeah,
But if you depend on your guys, now, if you ask my engine bosses who are in a firehouse with an ambulance, sure, they'd probably say they'd rather have firefighter paramedics on those ambulances. But what we found out is we were making them part of our deployment model, and every time we'd have a fire, they were at the hospital, so we have to call an audible. So we said we're just never going to count on them as part of our fire attack package.
yeah, I live that life. That's we run
Yeah,
4 jump companies,
yeah,
and the last fire I was on there were only 2 of us. The other 2 were at the hospital, and it's like 4 of
yeah,
us, or well, really it was 6 of us showing up with 2 engineers, right? And this house, it was fully involved. It exploded. It was a whole other thing. But it's just me and another guy at the corners just lobbing water because what else are you gonna do? Waiting for
what else
mutual
can
aid to
you
show
do?
up, right? And mutual aid shows up, and uh, then all of a sudden you have more people than you know what to do with. But
Right.
I mean, I want to say my last 3 fires, my department, there was at least 1 ambulance out, and so we're a 4
Yeah,
house department, and now
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
yeah,
And I don't
yeah,
know, do you guys have hydrants everywhere?
yeah, yeah. Water's not a problem with
Yeah,
that.
so water's a problem for us in some
Yeah,
places. So that was another
we
thing.
don't
We
have
show up,
yeah,
house completely exploded, gas main exploded, kept feeding the fire, and then we're trying to set up water supply, and we don't have anyone to do it. Waiting
yeah.
for a tanker and the whole porta tank thing, which I won't bore you with that crap. But
And we don't have to worry about that. Luckily, we got hydrants on top of hydrants. We're only 18 square miles. We're
okay,
we're a
yeah,
very densely. We're growing up, so yeah, we got water everywhere. We're on a lake. We got tons of
good for
water.
you. There's an art form to that rural water stuff. It's
There is.
yeah,
I have great respect for those people who run those tanker operations.
that was my life for. I mean, it still pretty much is. I feel like
Yeah.
where I currently work, most of our fires are in rural
Yeah.
water settings, and yeah,
You got to
it's
do what you got to do.
the county that I worked for before. Well, I'm still in the same county, but not in the same area. Like all of the departments together, they all had the exact same setup for their big water tankers, and so they all did 4-inch source connections,
Yeah,
and it was a whole like it was so
yeah,
smooth. And then I went
yeah.
a little bit farther south, and nobody does anything close to that. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's not that hard, guys. But whatever. Yeah,
No.
I digress. But um, Josh Everts is asking, when are you hanging it up? And will we get another book first?
No, you won't get another book. There's another book in the works, and it's going to look a little different. Thank you for the question. Right now, I don't have an exit plan, but right now I'm setting my sights on January 2027. That'll give me 40 years, and that's what I wanted to do. I want to write another book. I got a lot of ideas. It's just a time. I'm traveling so much.
I'm sure.
I mean, I'm traveling 20 to 30 weekends a year. I usually fly out Friday afternoon and back Sunday evening, with some few exceptions. So, yeah, I'm going to do another book. I think kind of on more of a leadership book, maybe kind of more of a text format. But yes, but not before I leave.
Yeah.
That'll be in the after
All right.
retirement.
I see you wearing those IFSI shirts. Maybe you come over here.
Oh, yeah. I had some experience there, and at one point there was talk about getting on the staff there, but that kind of died.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, they're a cool group down there for sure.
oh, they're awesome.
Yeah, put on some
I
great
know Richie
classes.
Stackwell
Yep.
and Bobby Hoff and all the gang there.
Oh, I'm
So
sure.
I knew Chief McCaslin when he was alive.
Yeah. Yeah, they just started doing a annual
Yeah,
training day in his honor.
Macapalooza,
Yep. Yep.
Macapalooza.
I went last
Yeah,
year.
I've been asked to teach, and I've had conflicts. A good buddy of mine, Mike Arico,
Yeah.
still lives in that area.
Oh yeah.
He worked with Mike in Oaklawn with the McCaslin boys and Larry McCormick and Tommy Cervino and Ho Jack and all those
Sure.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be cool to see you come to Mac for sure. That
Yeah,
they got Bobby Eckert this year. They
yeah.
pulled someone from out of the state, which was kind of cool to
Well,
see. So
well, it's a good choice.
yeah,
I just caught up with Bobby at a conference we were just at a couple weeks ago.
yeah, I bet he's a riot, man. He's a. I took at FDIC. He did like a minimum staffing,
Yeah.
like live fire thing, and it was awesome. His cadre is good.
We were at Jimmy Ellis training weekend, and he was there, so we got to catch up.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Uh, so you talk a lot about. I know in your keynote, which was awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
The cowboy way and risk and that's becoming an awesome conversation that fire service leaders like you are really starting to articulate it better than I think it's ever been about risk. I mean, I'm sure you read Rhodes' editorial that he just posted, like a couple days ago. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I want to hear you talk about it. But, we're talking about risk versus, safety, not versus safety. Sorry. One of your quotes is, "If we're being smart, we're being safe," and I use that all the time, and that's kind of where I'm going with this. And I want you to kind of share some of your thoughts on safety and risk.
And I could spend hours talking about it, but you look at the human capacity, and I was talking about this the other day. You look at the Blue Angels; they fly jets 18 inches apart. You look every Sunday, guys are strapping themselves in a NASCAR to going 200 miles an hour, and they built these systems of energy to where it's extremely rich with risk, but they're able to do those things recreationally with minimal incidents. All right, so we talk about the fire service. So let's just use the word safe, right? If you look it up in the dictionary, it's without risk. I mean, so we're applying a word that really doesn't. There's no such thing as a safe fire. We can make it safer. We can make it less dangerous. But we do it. We train. There's hazards. There's everything we do is driving associated risk. So my mindset is to me, safety is two dimensional. Do it, don't do it, wear it, don't wear it, go, don't go. And we're only giving you two choices. Risk management, I learned this from Gordon Graham. He actually edited the chapter in the book where I talk about safety and risk management. Risk management is a process, right? And you go back to your capabilities and limitations. I could have every piece of equipment known to firefighters. I could have every apparatus staffed with 10 people on every corner. But if I have a risk avoidance, a safety culture, I'm not going to utilize that to its full capacity, right? I'm going to throttle them down to where I'm not going to allow them to do anything. And so the risk management model is simply that, hey, let's recognize that there's a lot of risks every time we go out the door. Let's just get that out there. Let's identify them, let's prioritize them, and then let's look at the capabilities and limitations of the system to decide how aggressively we want to take on those risks. There may be some days where you don't have anybody you can put on a roof, so we're not going to go to the roof that day. Or, to one of those where it's a marginal situation, we got to grab a quick search, but I have nobody that can do that. So if you're truly say you're safe, if these guys who play the safety game, and this is where I jam them up, well, then you got to be all in on training. You got to be training every single day. You've got to have preparedness as part of your mindset, because that is the greatest safety action step you can take. But these chiefs who talk safety and their departments do the minimum amount of training every month, that's lip service, man. So it's just a totally different mindset. Let's become risk management experts. Let's confront the risks. And that was part of, it was funny. My original keynote was going to be the assignment because my daughter's a rapper and that's the music that they played coming out. And I was in bed one night sleeping and this came to me. You got to talk about safety standards and being cowboy ready, not being a cowboy, but being cowboy ready, being ready to perform at the highest level when it's necessary. These fire departments who are constantly in a docile or risk avoidance mode, they're going to have a rude awakening if that fire comes up where they got to be superheroes. You don't make that transition. You don't go 99 fires and be safe and then go to the 100 fire where the kid is trapped on the second floor and perform high on that incident. It just doesn't happen. You got to do it all the time. And so that's kind of the whole, it's just a different mind. We don't use the word safe in our organization, but I think we are very safe compared to most standards. Now people say, well, you let your guys go to the roof. That's not safe. Well, going to fires are not safe. But what I do have is I have the same people going to the roof every time. I don't have a guy going to the roof that hasn't done it in 10 years. That's a huge safety flaw right there. So their actions don't match their words, and they're actually being unsafe in their attempt to be safe. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
If we're not training, if we're not prepared, if we don't have positions, all those things play into safety. So I would say, if we were going to apply that, we are a very safe organization by most standards. But we don't look at it like that. We take a risk management viewpoint on it, and I want all. If you've ever heard my and I talked a little bit about the keynote, but when I do my 8 hour the functional fire company, I compare it to police and active shooters, and how early on, starting with Columbine, everybody took a safe approach, and the communities didn't allow that. They said, no, you're a police officer, you will engage and stop the shooter. And we saw that as recently at Uvalde, and two people that responded to Uvalde are now facing criminal charges for child abuse or child neglect.
Yeah.
So you tell me, how long can we screw around with all the crap that we do in the front yard before we go in and initiate a search or fire attack before our citizens who pay for our existence say, this isn't working? And it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, it's coming. They're wising up. The citizens are wising up to that.
Sure they are. And so this is what's going to do it, because social media, the experts weigh in on how we're doing. So if I know nothing about firefighting, but I have a couple friends that are in my social media groups that are firefighters and I read their comments, that's what I'm going to believe. And so we're going to expose ourselves more and more and more. And I don't know how that's going to play out for some organizations.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not preparing for it, it's at this point it's just arrogance, right? Or I mean, I don't even know if you could really claim ignorance at that point, right? It's truly like it's a choice to neglect all that. And I'm glad you brought up Gordon Graham, because like the high risk, low frequency, his four boxes, right? That has been so bastardized by people, and they use it almost as an excuse to not do things now, because this is a high risk, but it's low frequency. So we don't see it. Like, no, that is, you are completely missing the point of his whole presentation on that. And people just love to use those things in the wrong way to try to justify inaction.
Yeah, and you're right. But what we don't remember is there is probably hundreds, for sure, maybe thousands of fire companies that are going out the door right now, and they're going to a burning building, and they're successful. Our successes far outweigh our failures. Now, one firefighter line of duty death is too many, but there's actually in the ballpark of 10 to 14 average firefighters a year that die actively fighting fire, doing the search, doing the vent. The rest are falling, getting run over, heart attacks, all that others, And so we don't put things into context. and look at the big picture. You know, our guys are aggressive, but we train and we buy them the best equipment. They have the best leadership. And my check and balance is, knock on wood, we could have a bad fire event tonight and somebody could die or somebody could end their career with an injury. But I want, and I keep this in the back of my mind, I will be able to look at their loved ones in the eye and say, we did everything possible to prevent this. And this one just got the better of that. And I think that's the only way you can approach it. There's no guarantees, but there's not in anything. More firemen get killed driving to work and driving home from work in the morning, motorcycle wrecks, car wrecks, boating accidents they do in their spare time. I just think we can, when we get so safety conscious in an extremely dangerous job, we really reduce the capabilities of the system, and we're not providing the return on the taxpayer's investment, and that's an unsustainable position.
Yeah, eventually, like we said, they're going to wise up. They're going to ask for really. It's not. I was going to say they're going to ask for more, but they're not. They're just going to ask for what we promised them we would do in the first place. That's not more. It's
just do your job.
Yeah, yeah.
Just do your job.
One of the things that I've noticed with you and seeing you speak and seeing you speak on other podcasts and the things that you write is you're very personable. And, with that and how that comes through as a leader, how important is that as a leader to be personable? Sorry.
Well, I think because of the things that I say and the points that I make, it has to be personal. I have two sons that are firefighters. So obviously, I'm all in on firefighter safety and welfare and health. I mean, I'm all in. But I also know both of my sons put themselves in that position. They chose to do what they're doing, and they're good at it. And I have 5 grandbabies. And so, on the other hand, I think about those 5 grandbabies. And like I said in my keynote, I'm committed to building a system that I hope is in place where they live. And to me, that's just saying I'm going to provide the same level of services I expect. And if I'm not doing that, then you're somewhat hypocritical. I think if I'm saying, hey, I live in another town over and I want that fire department to be superheroes, but I'm in charge of this fire department and we're going to be the JV over here or the freshmen because I'm so afraid of risk. Well, that to me, that's talking out both sides of your mouth. So all as I'm doing is I'm building an organization that I would be okay with my sons working in, aggressive but cautious and risk management, and it's going to respond and it's going to give my grandbabies or anybody else's grandbabies the best chance of survival. It's pretty simple. So that's why I tell that story. I hope it brings a little credibility that I'm not just shooting from the hip and throwing out careless remarks. I take everything I say very seriously, and I think I can justify everything. That's why my answers are kind of long. I've thought this long and hard, and you'll very rarely catch me saying something that I haven't given a lot of thought to or had experiences with, and that's the personal part of it.
Yeah.
But I'm a human being just like everybody else. I got the same problems, the same worries, the same wants. I've been fortunate to be given opportunities like yourself to invite me on a podcast and share my message, and I take that very seriously. I hear some of these podcasts where guys are just kind of talking, and that can be dangerous, because a young fireman is watching this and thinks because somebody's on here, they're an authority on that. And so we got to be responsible with our opinions and our philosophies and our viewpoints. So that's the personal part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure, obviously, the phrase, like, would you want you saving you? And I think
Right. And that's
you
what
put
it is,
that,
right?
but
Yeah.
in a whole department level, would I want
Yeah.
my fire department coming to my house? I think that's a great way to phrase that leadership thought process. So,
And I would not implement a policy or procedure in the Colony Fire Department that I would not be okay with my two sons being governed by
yeah.
in their department.
What better sounding board, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chief, I'm going to roll into my closing questions here.
Okay.
There's a handful of people still in the live thing, so if you got more questions, which, by the way, great questions that you guys threw in there tonight.
Yeah, really good questions. Very good.
Yeah.
stuff I haven't been asked before, and I like that.
I think that's
I
the
like being
biggest
challenged.
that's the biggest challenge for someone in my position, right? Like I've heard you speak a lot, and like I want to make sure that I'm asking different things, but I'm also trying to make sure that the things that I found very valuable are also coming to my area because my show is very local. It's not like a national thing for the most, other than some friends that I've got, and so it's a weird like balance between those two things. But yeah, those questions those guys asked were really great, so
Very
I
good.
appreciate
Very
it.
good questions.
What's the best training or class that you ever participated in?
Oh, I thought about that. Probably the first saving our own. Rick came to Texas with Curtis Burt, and I think it was one of the first offerings of saving our own. And back with the original guys presenting it, and where I was at that point in time, I started teaching rapid intervention at the college when they first started talking about it because there were no books or no articles, so I kind of made it up. Of when Rick came in, and every one of the evolutions we were doing was tied to a line of duty death. John Nance, Mark Langbart, all those. That probably had the greatest. I mean, it was a confidence builder. It was a hands-on. It wasn't easy. It was difficult, and you had to talk and learn about these different things. So I thought that was a good one. I had the opportunity to go through uh, um, nozzle forward just a year ago. I'm 62. I got some back problems, so I listened. I didn't participate in the whole thing, but I was out there the whole time. That was a pretty good one. Um, so just a lot of good ones, but probably those. Going to Aniston for the hazmat stuff where you're working with live agent. For the hazmat gurus, that was pretty cool. So some of those are good ones.
That's cool. I'm not a hazmat guy, like I said, but I mean, live agent training. That's I didn't know that existed. That's pretty
Oh
sweet.
man, they,
Yeah.
they give you they give you a blood test. They do your baselines, and they'll tell you, you're using your sarin and all the real stuff is there, and it's the real deal. And they have this gymnasium, which they have like 50 dummies in, and music going off. It's like during a basketball game. You got to go in there and rescue them all, but they're constantly checking your blood gases and making sure you're not exposed. And yeah, it's free if you go to it. It's paid for by the federal government.
Is that that's not an NFA class, is it? Is it a national?
Oh, it's
No.
it's Anniston. It's a standalone. I think it's in Georgia, Anniston, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a really cool deal.
I'm gonna send that to my hazmat brothers.
You're there for a week. I mean, I've been to some cool tank car schools where they
Sure.
teach you how to offload and do all that. But probably saving your own was a big one.
I mean, I feel like so classes like that, or the live agent hazmat training, like
Mhm.
people try to replicate that stuff on shift, and it just obviously like you can't do it to that level. And so I feel like those kinds of more like will just go do your job type trainings are becoming more common now. Like
Mhm.
Basil's got the 24-hour shift
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
now, and like it'd
yeah,
be really cool to see
yeah,
some like a search one come out that's a little bit more in depth and a little more like live fire searching kind of stuff. I
yeah.
don't know if those classes quite exist in that way, but they're
Well, I
starting to.
mean, Rick George and Dave Gillespie, they do a resiliency thing that's
That's
over a couple deals. Bobby Eckert, he does some cool live fire. FDTN,
yeah, that's
going. I
true.
haven't been to.
Yeah,
My guys love it. I haven't been out there. Jimmy Crawford's invited me, and I'm just talking to Tim Collette. He invited me, but I think FDTN is about as good as there is for live fire training. I just haven't been out there yet.
yeah, I've heard that fire combat's really really cool, and
Yeah,
it's basically like I said, just go do your job. Like you get assigned a rig and you just do
yeah,
it, and
yeah.
that stuff is so invaluable because I try to tell people when we talk about training and doing like you need to do scenario training in some point, and if
Yeah.
you can't send people to stuff, then you got to try to at least provide something on shift, right?
Something.
Right, and whether
Right.
you got to get another town to cover or you do ghost companies to just simulate rate, you got to do something, right? And
Right. You got to build the decision making
yeah,
capability.
because it's the only place you can do it, or a fire ground, right?
Yeah.
And you should try to do it
Yeah.
way before an incident, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, That's cool though. I'm definitely gonna send that to my hazmat brothers. Uh, Sidebar question: do they call them booger eaters in Texas, or no? Is that just an Illinois thing?
I don't know what that is.
Hazmat guys. No,
Uh,
that
no,
must
we
just
call
be
it
us.
glowworms. Glowworms
Glowworms.
here. Yeah,
I think that might just be a Northern Illinois thing for us, but
mop
that's
and glow.
uh, that's funny. I was gonna call them booger eaters, but I didn't know if that was a nationally
Never heard
known
of
thing.
that.
That's funny. Don't use that. That's maybe just
No.
us. But have you ever lost your passion for the fire service? If you did, what'd you do to get it back, and what do you do to maintain it?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody goes through seasons and peaks and valleys. I there are even some times here in the colony where I started to lose my passion, but it's pretty easy for me to regain it. And again, having my boys on the job, I don't ever want to disappoint them, and they keep me at a high level. But when you get opportunities to do like the keynote or to write an article or whatever, yeah, I think the biggest thing is the awareness that you're starting to slip into either complacency or starting to lose the passion. And then, like everything else, it takes a commitment and effort to get back on track. So I think it's a battle, like Corley says, the constant battle against complacency. But yeah, I just remember the awesome responsibility that we've been given, and the fact that this can turn ugly really quick if you're not on your game, and that usually snaps me out of it pretty quick. So I don't have a lot of those situations, but I've had a few.
Sure. Yeah.
What you can't do is give up and let it win.
Yeah. Yeah, and like leaning on other people usually is a pretty good benefit too, right? I mean, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you have plenty of connections, obviously now, of people. So, um, if you wanted to give someone a sense of how fire service culture should work by meeting one person, who would it be? So this is like someone that knows absolutely nothing about the fire service, and you're going to put them with one person to kind of give them like the walkthrough of, hey, this is what we're all about, and alive or dead, doesn't matter who. Who would you put them with?
Well, probably Rick Lasky because he wrote the book on it. He understands traditions. He's got great exposure. He's worked for a lot of places. He's a teacher. He's a mentor. So I would probably say him. And he's passionate and he can sit down and talk to a brand new firefighter or somebody with 30 years on the job. So Jerry Wells would be another one. That's probably not a name that you know.
No, no.
Jerry Wells is a battalion chief in retired from Louisville. My buddy Mike Arico, I call him the
Yeah,
mayor of Fireville. There's nobody that he doesn't know. We could be in Alaska or Hawaii, and he knows people. So those are the kind of guys that are, a lot of people will tell you what they think you should think it should be if you say that right. But I'm talking about the ones that are going to give you the right message, the ones that are going to build that foundation and explain the why. But again, a lot of it is philosophical.
sure. Mike's a good one. He helped me start a Fools chapter. Mike's a
Oh,
good one.
good.
Yeah,
Mike,
yeah.
he's my best bud. He's coming in. Him and his wife are coming in town in 2 weeks, and we're going to go see Randy Rogers. But we see each other probably 6 or 7, 8 times a year. He's usually always my first call when I'm having a bad day
That's awesome.
because he's one of those. He'll tell me honestly. He'll say, "Hey, shut up, knucklehead. You're screwing up on this one."
Yeah, I
But
don't know if he'll remember me or know me that well, but he was part of that, helping me kind of.
he remembers everybody.
I'm
If he met you, he remembers you.
Yeah, yeah, he was really cool. Because he was an
What
original
Fools
South.
chapter?
We're half day
Yeah.
fools. So, but he
Okay.
was an original, with Southside Fools,
Southside.
and those guys have been very supportive of trying to get us. We were kind of in a little hole. We were in between Bruce City. We were in between Southside, and then we had another Northern Illinois Fools is to the west of
Yeah.
us. So we had a little pocket where there really wasn't anything, and we were like, we need to start something. So
What's the name of your chapter?
half day,
Half Day.
half day
Where'd
Fools.
that name come from?
So Half Day Road is runs through basically out of our 5 founding members. Half Day
Okay.
Road runs through our communities.
Okay.
Illinois Route 22, named after an old Indian chief, Aptakistic, and
Good.
which means half day. And so I don't actually hold on, stand by.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
so we tried to
Oh, I love it.
incorporate some of the Native American stuff in the sun for half
Very
day, and
nice. Love it.
so
I co-founded the Heart of Texas Fools here in 2002, about the same time the Southside Fools were starting up. Our chapters are very close to one another, so I'm a big supporter of the Fools.
yeah, they've been really great, and we're growing.
Yeah.
We're really new. So we're trying to kind of get to that point, right, where we've got enough to be able to pull some people to speak, um, and we're getting there. So
Well, good luck.
yeah, it takes a while for stuff to grow, like you said, and
Oh yeah.
um,
And we've had peaks and valleys in our Fools chapter. For a while, everybody thought we were a motorcycle gang where we were all riding our Harleys, and yeah, so you'll have those peaks and valleys for sure.
yeah, I think we're I think we're only like 12 guys right now, so we're trying, but we're trying to make a splash, and
You got to start somewhere.
right, and pull somebody to come speak, and then get some notes. So we had
Yep.
Jeff Bryant. Did you ever meet him?
Yep.
Right,
Yeah,
from
no, Jeff.
Aurora. So Jeff
Yeah.
came and he did a whole presentation on rescue survey and some things like that. So and
Good.
he was awesome to us. I think he donated, or we raffled the Halligan bar. Like we're getting there, But
Good.
it's been a lot of fun, and it's cool that we were able to do that. And Mike was very helpful. I met him at FDIC, and we talked
Yeah.
about it a little bit, and yeah, it was definitely a lot of his help to kind of get us going and make those connections, right? So, all right, last question.
Okay.
It's pretty easy, I guess, or maybe it could be hard. But what's the best part of the job?
Oh man. Uh, you know, obviously you want to say the people. I met some of the coolest people on the planet. I love firefighters, the ones that are into the job. I really, really dig them. The fact that you can go anywhere and walk into a firehouse and say you're a firefighter, that's the easy one. But I'm gonna. A lot of people would say that. Probably to me, it's the opportunities that are given to us. Um, One of the things that Pete Lund told me that I said in my keynote, and I say all the time, is, he was at Rescue 3 at the time at the South Bronx, and he said, he was telling this to me. He says, I have every opportunity to be a firefighter at the highest level. But if you think about it, we got all these type A personalities that come together and they come in this firehouse, which is unique in itself. And we're broken into these fire companies and just, we're the local protection in any single community. And we go out the door with this technology and this training, and we make decisions with often inaccurate information, with extreme time constraints, with catastrophic outcomes. And to me, there's just nothing like it. I've got friends that are Navy SEALs, and they'll say, the preparation that they go into before a mission, they would never do what we do. They would never, in 45 seconds, go from sound asleep to combat. I don't think any, maybe a SWAT team would. So I think that's kind of the coolest part is just the function that we serve in society, and how we respond as a team. To me, that's just real. There's nothing like fire service leadership or leading in the fire service. So aside from all the really cool people, their traditions and that stuff, I'd have to say that that's probably it.
Yeah, no, yeah. There is no other job where you really are making those decisions like that. You're spot
Nope.
on.
No. I don't know how many plumber or carpenters are doing podcasts,
Yeah, right. I
and
mean,
if there are, is anybody watching them? But I mean, we got guys that are, here it is going on 10 o'clock at night, and guys are tuning in and listening and picking up bits and pieces. And, that's just super cool.
yeah,
We represent something bigger than ourselves.
yeah. I think we're in another renaissance of the fire
Yeah.
service right now. I really think we are. I think it
Yep.
started a couple years ago, and it's really picking up speed right now. And
I agree.
it's
I
really
agree.
cool
We're,
to
we're
see.
kind of redefining ourselves, our priority, what our mission is.
Hmm.
And there's there's certainly a movement going on.
Yeah, it's very grassroots, which is what makes it even better. It's
Awesome.
yeah, it's awesome. So, well, that's gonna make the show. Hang out for give me 5 more minutes in the green room after this. But I want to say thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I usually forget to ask this question, so I'm going to make sure that I do it. And that's basically if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how could they? If they had more questions or something of that nature.
Scott with 2 T's at fireserviceleadership.com.
There you go. And hopefully you type it right, unlike me trying to send Zoom invites. So
Yeah, and I'm a little bit of a procrastinator, so I won't get back to. I'll get back to you, but not in a real hurry. I just got about 1,000 things going on.
well, I mean, yeah, you're a pretty busy guy, so I think that's understandable. Well, thank you again, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Thanks for having me on.